Good afternoon. Welcome to Progressive Soup. My name is David Stevenson. Happy Thanksgiving. We're here having a bowl of turkey soup. We've had. We're going to get down to the rest of the stuff later on, but we're working on our turkey soup now. And we were talking while we were off camera between shows about a couple of very great Republican presidents named Dwight Eisenhower and Teddy Roosevelt, and how those presidents were mentioned at length during the most recent debate of the Democratic Party, and talking about, in the case of Dwight Eisenhower, the fact that Bernie Sanders pointed out that the top tax rate during the Eisenhower administration was 90%, and rich people did not seem to mind very much paying more taxes than they complain about paying now, because they recognize that it's this great country we call America that allowed them to become wealthy and allowed them to put their hard work to making themselves wealthy and prosperous, and they didn't mind giving back a little bit. First of all, let's go back and everybody can reintroduce themselves and explain what got them involved in working to help get Bernie Sanders elected president of the United States. Deb?
My name is Debra Cohen. I live in Wethersfield. I came to Bernie Sanders through Occupy, not directly being in New York, but working through Occupy Hartford here in Connecticut. It was through Occupy that I learned about the corruption of Wall Street. It was through Occupy that I was introduced to people working on issues like getting Monsanto out of our food and at least labeling GMOs. It was through Occupy that I came to work quite fervently against the TPP, against Citizens United, all of those things that are quite directly related in terms of money. TPP being Trans-Pacific Partnership,
yes. The latest, and maybe relatively speaking, maybe the least offensive, maybe the best of all the deals that have been struck, but certainly it still stinks.
Certainly not the gold standard.
Right. It's still it may be the best, but it still stinks.
Yes.
Well, coming to all of those issues through the awareness through Occupy, when I discovered Bernie Sanders, I realized here is a man who is talking about all of these issues, and he sees it as this giant picture of related issues that all come down to, that being tied together through big money and corporate influence, corporate corruption. So how can I not give my full support to someone who stands for all of the things that I do?
I think it's safe to say he speaks for a lot of people. Nick?
My name's Nick Smith. I grew up in Milford. I first learned about Bernie in 2010 during his 8.5-hour filibuster against the Bush-era tax cut extensions for the wealthy. But what ultimately pushed me into action was on 27 now, when I turned 26, and I had to get off my parents' health care and start dealing with health insurance companies firsthand. And that is honestly what motivated me to really start to get into this stuff, because it's a nightmare, and it's a nightmare that everyone has to deal with. And seeing both of my parents, who are each in their 60s now, seeing this be a regular issue, dealing with health insurance companies, it's not something I can stand for. Bernie is really the only candidate left now fighting for universal health care, and that is extremely important to me, and it's something we desperately need.
Jeannine?
I'm Jeannine Lupo. I'm here from Litchfield, Connecticut, part of the Bernie Sanders Connecticut team. And like Nick, I first became aware of Bernie in 2010 when he filibustered to take a stand against the extension of the Bush-era tax cuts. And when I did more research about Bernie, I realized that he was the only one at that time in the Senate, previously when he was in the Congress, that was standing up for everyday Americans. And everything that he did went towards standing up for everyday Americans. And previously, I was a big Ralph Nader supporter, and I felt that Ralph was, the only real civil servant out there that was, dedicating his public life to, working towards getting monetary influence out of politics. And, I remember paying attention to the Iraq War, and no one really getting upset about how much money Halliburton had made during the Iraq War, and the conflict of interest between someone owning a company and being in the position of power. And Bernie Sanders is now taking on the lessons learned from the Nader campaign in terms of being a third-party candidate, in that he's now on the Democratic ticket, and we're looking to win the primary.
He's moved from being an outsider to a degree to an insider to a degree, but he still has that outsider feel about him. Still has a lot of not being beholden to any political party or any special interest group other than us.
Right.
I think he made a great point in the last debate to say that I have 700,000 donors, and that's who I have to answer to.
Right.
I thought that was a great moment.
Yeah, to be the longest-serving independent, that's no small task. It's really quite remarkable, and for that man to now be potential president is pretty huge.
It is, and as we've said a couple of times, 3 or 10 times, it's exciting being part of that. It's exciting being out there, having the conversations, and I think it was you, Deb, that brought up the idea, the notion of speaking with prospective voters for Bernie Sanders and giving them the opportunity to talk about what's important to them. Might have been all of you that mentioned it.
I think we've all had that conversation with each other too. Right. It is important for us to listen to other people as much as we want to speak to them about our point of view and what we, how we want to represent Bernie. But I think that when we know the information about where he stands, if we ask people what their main issues are, what are their main concerns, and they tell us that, we can give them very concrete examples of how Bernie Sanders' platform speaks to that. There's a lot to know, but it's worth sharing.
I also think that when you consider how many undecideds there are out there, I think a portion of the undecideds are people who thought that their vote never counted. And the fact that someone is taking the time to ask them what's important to them, to ask them, do you realize this information is out there? Those kind of connections that we've made with not disenfranchised but never engaged voters has been really important.
Right.
Yeah.
You find a lot of common ground with people that you never thought you might find common ground with, particularly in the case of libertarians and liberals. I found over the 6 years we've been on the air, libertarians and liberals share a lot of very important commonality on issues like wiretapping, on just a variety of issues that we have a lot of agreement on. Nick?
Aside from the rightest of the right, we all have common ground. They're really the biggest issues that Bernie's fighting for are things that ultimately we can all agree on. So if you can get past the divisive social issues, if you can get past certain things, yes, there are going to be certain people that you're just never going to be able to have a good conversation with. But I think the vast majority of Americans are just normal people who want the same things, and I think Bernie is able to speak to all of them, and I think it's our challenge as supporters to find a way to match that, to match his tone, and to not get defensive, and to really be able to listen to other perspectives, and then I think when you do that, when you really want to hear what the other person has to say, and you really try and put yourself in their shoes and empathize with them, that you're going to be able to really celebrate the common ground that you share.
And if only the Congress could operate from that model.
Yeah, if only.
Well, I think it would be interesting if people would start out their political conversations without sharing their political affiliations. it would be so interesting to find out where we have our commonalities, because I think people tend to get defensive and they put up that wall as soon as they hear that somebody is from another party or from another direction. If we didn't share that at the beginning, I wonder how much further we would get in our conversations.
Yeah, I agree with that, because I think there's only so much value to those labels, and they're changing all the time, that they eventually stop meaning things. And Theodore Roosevelt, my favorite president, one of the greatest presidents, and he was a Republican. Are the Republicans today anything like Theodore Roosevelt? It's so ultimately, what do these things mean? We're all just humans, and that's what Bernie he repeats that a lot. We're all just humans. There's some base things that we all share, and it's very easy to forget that. But when you start to remember that, you start to realize, oh, everyone isn't my enemy. We just might disagree a little bit.
Well, when he talks about winning, he doesn't say when I win. He says when we win. And the first time I heard him say that, it's going to sound really corny, but it brought tears, because it's a whole different way of coming to politics.
The idea that
to humanity.
The government is here for the people, not just the entitled few.
Right.
If you thought that felt corny, I actually said to my husband, geez, if we wanted to have another kid, I think we could now. If Bernie were to be elected, I would consider having another child.
Right.
Yeah.
And they'll go to university.
I mean, that is something to think about, though. It's like, with climate change, we need serious action now. We don't have time to wait. And the things that Black Lives Matter is fighting for, we don't have time to wait to address these issues. We need somebody who's going to do it now. We don't have time for the mindset that the country is an oil tanker, and if you move it too far to the left too fast, it's just going to topple over. I don't think the history has proven that to be true. I think there has been relatively dramatic changes in this country relatively quickly, and after just the downward trend of the middle class just being decimated over the past several decades, it is time for a dramatic shift. And all of the things that Bernie is fighting for, they're not idealistic, they're necessary.
And it's not unfair to say that at all, that I think everybody, again, would agree with the fact that if someone works 40 hours in a week, if they direct themselves into a full-time job, that they should earn enough money to put a roof over their heads,
Absolutely.
to their families, to provide nutrition for their families, to feed their families, and also to afford transportation to and from their job.
I think one of the things that maybe people don't understand, because you see a lot of pushback when it comes to, let's say, the minimum wage being raised to $15 an hour. One of the arguments that people will use to push back is that, well, minimum wage was intended for, let's say, teenagers. And while that may or may not be true, the fact that large-scale corporations have utilized that as a way to suppress labor costs is what we're really fighting against. The idea that so many people who are working 40 hours a week for these lowest wages, and oftentimes they're just under 40 hours a week so that the company doesn't have to pay health insurance, can skim the costs on other state programs, whether it be Medicaid or Medicare, the employee contribution. The fact that then those people are forced into other government programs, whether it be SNAP, whether it be housing assistance or heating assistance, we're subsidizing these corporations who are then giving billions of dollars in profit to their shareholders, their board members. These bonuses that CEOs walk away with.
Walmart, not to call anybody out specifically, but Walmart is the perfect example of that, where their employees are forced to take advantage of social programs, which people shouldn't have to and wouldn't have to if Walmart paid people a living wage.
And as we see more and more jobs getting shipped overseas, it's not necessarily teenagers and high school summer workers working at this minimum wage job thing. The people who are working these jobs are people who are trying to raise their families, to pay the rent, to make all of those expenses. So, it may have been years ago where minimum wage jobs were entry jobs for kids who were just trying to save up some money for a summer. No more, because the other jobs aren't here anymore.
Yeah. Without a union contract to protect your, let's say, step salary increases, you have no way of building from that initial starting salary. No matter how long you're there, whether you're being called an entry-level floor worker in a retail position or a mid-level manager.
And that's another way that a lot of companies, particularly McDonald's, not to call them out specifically, but this is what they've done, is change people over from being hourly employees to being managers.
Okay.
And in doing that, they take them out of the 40-hour work week, and they can have them work longer than 40 hours at a salary that ends up being lower per hour than minimum wage.
Right.
Yeah, and to bring it back to great former American presidents, the second Roosevelt, FDR. If anyone hasn't already watched the Georgetown speech that Bernie did last week, I would highly encourage everyone to watch that, because to me it's one of the most significant political speeches of, I would say like the last 50 years. It is a very significant speech, and in it he brings up Roosevelt's proposed second Bill of Rights. And the idea is that you don't have true freedom unless you also have economic freedom. And I remember when I first learned about that in history class in high school. Shout out to Mr. Rollins at Foreign High School. Great history teacher.
Shout out.
Told it like a story, made me super interested, and it's when I first heard about that, I was like, how did this never happen? How has it been this long and none of this stuff has ever happened? It's amazing that somebody's finally fighting for that, because it's absolutely true. You do not have real freedom if you have to worry about going to the doctor, if you have to worry about just everything. You're not a free person.
Right. People are worried. I hear people say they're worried about Bernie's use of the word revolution. Okay. The revolution that he's talking about is the revolution of people actually going out and voting and getting involved in the system and really becoming, active participants.
Only in America is that a revolution.
However, if things continue to go the way they are, all right? If salaries keep plunging, if people keep losing their jobs, if corporate America keeps squishing us tighter and tighter and tighter, if we keep losing our voice to an even greater degree, there will be a revolution of a very different kind.
Well,
I think we need to decide which one is to our advantage and which one is not.
We're going to have this conversation eventually, because as everything becomes automated, as the majority of minimum wage jobs disappear due to automation, we're going to have a huge crisis. We already have 10% real unemployment.
Right.
So what is it going to be when there's no fast food jobs, when there's no Walmart jobs? That's a very real thing that is coming soon, and we're going to have to address it at some point. So
a lot of employers, though, have actually begun the process of paying people more money, and they're finding that, lo and behold, they're finding that people work a lot harder when they know that they don't have as many worries about paying their bills,
like Costco,
and when they're respected.
Yeah.
And they're respected for the work that they do.
And they feel that the person that they work for cares about them enough to pay them a living wage.
Yeah. Everybody's had a good boss, and everyone has had a bad boss. And under the bad boss, did you ever feel motivated to work harder? It's treating people like human beings and giving people the ability to survive by working, for your company. It shouldn't be such a novel concept, but at this point it is.
The other thing that Bernie ties into this whole idea of keeping our societies together rather than watching them fall apart is the whole environmental piece. And he's been criticized for saying that climate change is the biggest thing that we need to be concerned about, but
biggest threat to national security.
Thank you.
I'm so proud of
but
him for standing up for
me
that.
too. Yeah.
When we have limited water, when we have limited clean air to breathe, when the whole picture comes together,
when
and those
Bangladesh
things
is underwater.
Exactly. to say that we're going to have a problem is such an understatement, and rightfully so. So I think he gets it. He sees the big picture and he just spells it out.
To also tie into what Debra and Nick are saying, the idea that, you know, the companies are looking to own water supplies and profit off of water supplies, or you know, seeds.
That's happening right here in Connecticut.
It's insane.
In Stratford, the sewer thing, where they want to make the sewers
They're privatizing it?
Yeah.
There's a lot of dangers in that. There's a company in Connecticut, Aquarian, it's an international conglomerate that's bought a lot of public water systems, public water supply delivery systems, and therefore they control and they pay a lot up front in order to achieve those goals, but they're for profit, and they're going to get that money back through fees. My town, Bethel, actually voted down the sale of the water supply delivery system in our town to Aquarian, and it was that vote was one of those great moments where liberals and libertarians have gotten together. They recognized that we owned these delivery systems, we owned these things, and we should not hand them over to a for-profit company.
You said the name of the company is Aquarian?
Aquarian.
Yeah. And do you know how infiltrated into Connecticut they are at this time?
They purchased the Bridgeport Hydraulic Company a number of years ago, and have gone from there to acquire more and more of the. Well, you can't buy the water. The water belongs to all of us. The water that's under the ground is owned by the state of Connecticut, and therefore is owned by us as residents of the state of Connecticut. But they've bought delivery systems, so that they're the ones that process the water and deliver it to us. And in Bethel, they tried to use the notion that the system was outdated and had been worked on for a long time and needed a lot of updating, and they would do that work, but they never do these things without passing on the costs.
Right, of course.
Companies do not do things without passing on the costs to the consumer, plus that profit margin. And that's what you have. That's what you don't have when we own the water delivery system, which we still do.
And those upgrades that you're talking about are part of the infrastructure package that Bernie is basing his campaign on.
Right.
Yeah, when you talk about things that people want to privatize the post office, I mean, there has been a concerted effort to try and destroy the post office, you know, it's fun to complain about and say UPS and FedEx are just so great, but the reality is, how else are you going to send a letter from New York to California for, what is it, 45 cents, almost 50 cents now?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, Bernie, his plan of
Creating the banks and the post office.
Yeah, creating, essentially turning the post office into a semi-bank is brilliant. And I think, you know, with Bernie, a lot of people feel like, well, I agree with him, I like what he stands for, blah, 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 but it's not realistic. It's just not going to happen. The reality is that Bernie is the most pragmatic person that you can vote for, because what he is doing by motivating, like, the three of us here who have never participated in politics before to be doing things at this level, that means that he is going to have the ability to, in the midterm election, get Democratic control of Congress. Hillary Clinton has already resigned to the reality that her only method of getting anything done is going to be executive orders. You know, I think Bernie is trying to, not that everything in America has to be a war on something, but it's kind of a war on cynicism. And to my mind, Obama started that war, and I fully bought into it in 2008, and then, you know, he kind of just let it go. And in fact, Marshall Gans, he's the guy that was really responsible for Bernie Obama's grassroots volunteer efforts, and he started the Camp Obama thing, where they had the ability to pay volunteers out and to send them out somewhere and train them. He argued in 2010 himself as the man who set all this up, as the man responsible for this massive grassroots support that got Obama elected, that Obama did let it go, that the DNC took control of Obama for America, and it really just became another email list that people are signed up
On
for.
the subject of the post office, and shout out to Bob Garavell, good friend of Progressive Soup's, been on many, many times, who was a letter carrier. And letter carriers serve the purpose of being the eyes and the ears of a community. They know the people that they're delivering mail to, and they keep an eye out for them. They serve a very, very important, very useful purpose in the community, and I think that's something that it would be sad to lose. I mean, there's not much that I can think of that goes out through the mail service anymore, except for what we call junk mail.
Yeah.
But to have people out delivering the mail and having that day-to-day contact with the people on their route in their microcosm community, that's a great thing. It always has been, and it's important to maintain that.
Yeah, and it's no coincidence that the Post Office Workers Union has endorsed Bernie. Yes, that they, similar to his ideas with community policing, it's there are aspects that make a community, and I think increasingly people don't feel like they live in a community. They feel like they live in a strip mall, and they just feel separate from other people.
Right.
That doesn't breed empathy. It breeds contempt when you don't know your neighbors, when you aren't talking to other people, I think. Again, Bernie is really a champion. In my book, he's a champion for empathy and the importance of it.
So I think we also want to reiterate the idea that if you go onto the National Campaign's website, www.berniesanders.com, there are so many tools that you can use to become connected to the local campaign, whether it's looking to phone bank by yourself or to plan a phone banking party. It's one of the biggest things that we can do right now for the national campaign. Because
And with that, we're going to have to bid you a continuing happy Thanksgiving, and we'll be back next Wednesday evening with some more discussion about some things important to all of us. Thanks for joining us at Progressive Soup.